Hey everyone, this is Osama Dahud here with the 4040 Vision podcast, the sports history podcast where hindsight is 4040. Thank you for joining here. And every Monday we do new episodes, and on Thursdays we do shorts. So please subscribe, and let me get into today's episode, which is about Jon Jones, the GOAT of MMA. He's back after a 3 year layoff, and I want to talk a bit about his career. I want to talk about his impact on MMA, why this is a big deal, his resume, some of my memories of Jon Jones, some of his troubles, and kind of the bigger picture. So it's been 3 years. He had some back and forth with the UFC about contracts and things like that, but ultimately he's making his heavyweight debut against Cyril Gane, and it's a little surprising that he's gotten this point at heavyweight. He won the championship very young in his early 20s. And it was always discussed that at some point he'd move up to heavyweight because he would grow into his body. We just didn't know that it would be at 35 years old. But I mean, this is a big deal. This is, you can make a really strong argument, the greatest of all time in mixed martial arts. You have your Anderson Silvas of the world, George St. Pierre, Fedor Emelianenko, Demetrius Johnson. Like there are some great Khabib, some great fighters. And to me, Jon Jones is probably the greatest of them all. And I mean, Anderson Silva had a peak that was really close. George St. Pierre definitely had a run where he was very dominant. I look at Jon Jones and I just see the full package in terms of generational fighters. Jon Jones is in MMA, considering it hasn't been around that long at this with this popularity, kind of a once in a lifetime fighter in terms of just purely fighting. Like he's had some troubles, but let's keep it on the sport. He's been nothing short of legendary. He's Floyd Mayweather, he's Muhammad Ali, he's Jordan. He's the guy that in the big moment he shows up and everyone watches and he delivers every single time. And there have been guys that have come to prominence a little bit during his run on the second half of the layoff, before the layoff, and while he's been out of the spotlight. And I still think these guys today that are champions can't hold a candle to him. You know, Usman, Volkanovski, Adesanya, these are amazing fighters. I look at Jon Jones, and it's not just who he beat. I mean, it's how he did it consistently. It takes a long time to get to where Jon Jones is at. In terms of like impact on the sport of MMA, I mean, we love, as spectators of sport, we love dynasties, the Patriots, the Celtics, the Bulls, the Warriors, UCLA basketball. With Anderson Silva and GSP in the late 2000s, and maybe early 2010s, kind of entering the back half of their careers, the UFC needed a second coming of that kind of dynastic excellence. And Jon Jones filled that void so quickly. It was like just in a flash, he was at the top of the sport. Um, and I think it's a tribute to just the way he fights, his fighting style. He has this incredible wrestling. He was a state champion. He had this length that for light heavyweight it looked natural to him. It was really hard to get inside because of his reach. He's impossible to dominate. I mean, during his fights, he's like an AI. He has this amazing fight IQ with this huge, amazing just ability to be adaptable on the fly and find the pressure point. During fights, he can change his game plan. He does random stuff like axe kicks and leg stabs. He messes with opponents. He looks for any way to do damage. He starts the fight kind of crawling like a spider. You know, Jon Jones, you look at the way he won his fights. I don't think Jon Jones, you can just call him an MMA fighter. I think he's a violent machine in the way he approaches the sport of mixed martial arts. He was also into mind games. He still is now. If you look at the build up to this fight, he watches his opponents' interviews, he watches their fight tape, he watches their training videos, the previews, looking for whatever ammo he could find and fire back with a comment. Or and he's at this point in his career, very much earned that entitlement. Um, but given that he won the title at such a young age, he was a millennial amongst a slightly older generation of guys. And some of those older guys like Chuck Liddell and Shogun Rua and Rashad Evans, a little bit older, not as much of an online presence as Jon Jones. He's a millennial. I think that all of that kind of made it interesting to see him talk about Daniel Cormier and how hateful that looked. It was probably the most hateful of them all. Uh, Looking back at like my first memory of Jon Jones, I remember him fighting Matt Hamill, who was a good like wrestling prospect. And I don't say this very often, to be honest. People say this a lot, but he really did just beat the shit out of Matt Hamill. He was dragging him around like a rag doll and on the ground, just going to town with elbow after elbow. And he was disqualified because he got really overexcited and he's throwing elbows like a stab at a dangerous angle, and he got disqualified. And he got up off Matt Hamill, who was laying there in a pool of blood on his face. And it was one disqualification that you look at and you're like, yeah, I mean, he was going to win that fight. I think no one looks at that loss as a legitimate loss on his record. And he just continued to dominate. I remember when he got the shot to fight Shogun Rua. Rashad Evans pulled out of the fight due to an injury, and I think it was only a month after his fight against Ryan Bader. He's in the cage, and Shogun at the time I did a short on him at the top of the sport, and we're like, okay, I mean, this kid the run has been good. Is he really going to pull this off? And he dominated Shogun, and he made it look so easy. I was in shock at how quickly Jon Jones he's fighting Matt Hamill in December of 2009, and then 2 years later he's at the top of the sport, and he fights Rampage Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, and he made all of those look easy, and those were tough opponents. There was no doubt during those fights that he was going to lose them. There was no way. He was always going to win. He did get pushed to the brink by Alexander Gustafsson in their first fight. I think every great fighter has their kind of come to Jesus moment where they're pushed to the brink. And those two guys fought damn near to the death. You hear like about Ali versus Frazier 3, Thrilla in Manila in the Philippines in the 70s. It's humid, it's hot. The fight was 15 rounds, and Muhammad Ali said that was the closest he ever felt to death. And I think that's how Jon Jones felt about this fight. These guys went to the hospital right after the fight. It's considered arguably the greatest fight in UFC history just because of the high level of striking and competition in that fight. And he continued from there. And I think that although that was the best fight to watch, his greatest accomplishment is beating Daniel Cormier twice. Daniel Cormier, Olympic wrestler, took him down. Had never been taken down before. Jon Jones fights Daniel Cormier, and he takes him down. And I think the first fight, he was stripped because of the cocaine violation. The second fight was a no contest because of the steroid substance that was caught in the system that was later nullified by the Athletic State Commission. I thought that would be the end of the line with Daniel Cormier, and because Daniel Cormier was a heavyweight, and he didn't fight at heavyweight because his buddy Cain Velasquez was fighting in heavyweight, and some of these guys in the same camp, they just don't do that. It's like an unwritten rule: if you train together, you don't fight together. So he lost, as big as he was, lost a lot of weight to fight at light heavyweight, and he wanted the crown, and Jon Jones wouldn't let him. And I thought that was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in the history of MMA, that he was able to beat Daniel Cormier like that. It's just so competitive. Um, he's had some trouble though. Although his resume is amazing, uh, some of these great fighters, they have their moments. Like Tyson Fury beat Vladimir Klitschko to win the heavyweight title almost 10 years ago, and he said that he didn't feel like he had reached the top of the sport. It didn't feel like how he thought it would feel when he got there. And he went into this deep depression and a cocaine addiction, and he put on 100 pounds before he came back and fought Deontay Wilder a bunch of times. And Jon Jones, it's kind of hard to say. Like, he was cleared of wrongdoing for any PEDs. The only banned substance he's tested positive for is cocaine. And it's surprising because he continued to perform at a high level, even though he had these lapses in discipline. It's just really shocking. Um, I think that if he wasn't cleared by the Athletic State Commission, I don't think we'd be excited to see him, but I don't think we'd have the same level of excitement given that he would be labeled as a cheater. And that's just not the case. He's not considered a cheater. He's done some bad things. There's the domestic violence issue. He was a hit and run with a pregnant woman. I mean, he's done some dumb, terrible things that are a tarnish on his legacy. He does have some of that in him. When it comes to purely fighting, I can separate the art from the artist. Just talking about the pure science of what he does in the octagon. So moving up to heavyweight, this is a big deal for Jon Jones, the GOAT of the sport. It's another opportunity to add to his legacy. He's got a Tom Brady moment here where he can have a second Hall of Fame career if he can win the heavyweight title. And if there's anything we've learned about Jon Jones, like, he's up to the task. There is no challenge too great for him. He's simply the best. That's the episode. I hope you enjoyed. Please subscribe, please download, please share all of the above. We really appreciate it. Apple, Spotify, Overcast, wherever you get podcasts. These shorts come out almost every Thursday. We try. And Mondays, we have new episodes all the time. And our podcast is evergreen. There's a lot of good stuff we've done in the past, like what if, super hypothetical fan fiction stuff for teams like the 49ers, the Cowboys, the Raiders, the Buffalo Bills. We've done the Golden State Warriors. We've done a couple of look backs on eras and legacies, interviews with Mohsen Kaysen, who's a professional boxer, or a development staff manager for the Golden State Warriors. So go back and check all that out. It doesn't get old when you go back and listen to it. I hope this does it either. Again, I appreciate you for listening. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.